How many days have you lived that felt like someone else's life? Days where the alarm screams before dawn and you're already behind. Wayne, 36, knows those days well. 8 years he spent as a third-shift warehouse supervisor, a ghost moving pallets while the world sleeps. He clocks in, clocks out, a silent promise to his kids that he's doing his best. Wayne isn't lazy, not even close. He's reliable. It's just somewhere along the line, the man he wanted to be got lost in the routine. He remembers his dad's garage, the smell of oil and possibility. He remembers the promise he made to himself to open his own shop. He's not alone. We all tell ourselves stories, justifications for the paths we didn't choose. Wayne's story started with a baby on the way and the need for stable insurance. The warehouse was temporary, a means to an end. Now he sees that temporary turned into years. His son, Jake, asked him a simple question on a fishing trip a day away to recharge. "Dad, do you even like your job?" Not with malice, just curiosity. But it hit Wayne harder than a punch to the gut. He saw in Jake's eyes a reflection of his own resignation. That question hung in the air, thicker than the morning mist over the lake. Wayne reeled in his line, the motion mechanical. He looked at his son, 11 years old, a miniature version of himself, but with brighter eyes. Eyes that hadn't yet seen 8 years of nights blurring into days. The drive home was silent. Wayne dropped Jake off at his mother's, his ex-wife Sarah. They exchanged polite nods, a familiar ritual. Another layer of Wayne's life dictated by routine and duty. Back at his small duplex, the silence was deafening. $18,000 in credit card debt from the divorce, a $15,000 loan on his 2017 Ford F-150. The numbers swam in his head, another reminder of his failure to provide, to protect. He's supposed to be the provider, the father. But how much of a father is he when he sleeps through most of his kids' lives? He poured himself a cup of coffee, black, and sat at the kitchen table. He saw the faded photo of him and Jake changing a tire, one of those rare, proud moments. Jake beaming up at him, covered in grease. A moment of genuine connection, a moment he desperately wanted to recapture. But how? The warehouse was a concrete box filled with the constant hum of machinery and the beeping of forklifts. Wayne walked the floor, his boots echoing on the polished concrete. He was a ghost in his own life, walking the same path every night. He remembered his dad's garage, the sense of accomplishment of fixing something broken. A skill passed down, now rusting. He started his shift, a sea of fluorescent lights reflecting off the metal shelving. Another night, another set of problems to solve. Damaged pallets, late shipments, understaffed crew. It was all the same. Even his proudest moment, the promotion to shift supervisor, now felt like a curse. He's making 26/HR, enough to keep him from drowning, but not enough to breathe. He thought of his secret dream, a garage like his dad's, a place he could call his own. Wayne's garage, simple, honest. It used to feel possible. Now it felt like a distant memory. Then a shift. He didn't quit. He didn't win the lottery. He just decided to reclaim 1 hour. When the alarm screamed at 6:30 a.m., he didn't collapse into bed. Instead, he walked out to his carport. The old motorcycle project was a skeleton of chrome and rust. He hadn't touched it in years, a forgotten dream. He ran his hand over the cold metal, felt the familiar texture of grease and grime. A spark ignited, small but there. He grabbed a wrench. The wrench felt heavy in his calloused hand. 8:00 p.m. That was the sound of his alarm, another hit of black coffee, bitter and strong, the taste of another night. 9:15 p.m., the drive to the warehouse, the same route he'd driven for 8 years. The same billboards, the same faded storefronts. The world asleep and Wayne, 36, heading to work. He pulled into the lot, the Ford F-150, a symbol of his responsibility, not freedom. $15,000 still to go on that loan. 10:00 p.m., the start of the shift. The endless walk, mile after mile on concrete, supervising, directing, solving problems that never ended. 8 hours, $26 an hour, enough to pay the bills, the $42,000 in debt, the child support, enough to keep his head above water. But was he living or just surviving? He saw the faces of his crew, the same weariness etched on their faces. Were they all just waiting for Friday? He remembered his dad, hands covered in grease, a smile on his face. Wayne's garage, a place of pride. He could almost smell the oil and the gasoline, his regret a constant ache. He had the chance once, before Sarah, before the kids, before the mortgage. He traded it for stability, for a steady paycheck. 6:00 a.m., end of shift, the drive home in the pre-dawn light. The world waking up, birds chirping, the sun just starting to peek over the horizon. A world he was missing. He arrived home, the small duplex rental, neat but impersonal. 7:00 a.m., cereal standing at the counter, cold, tasteless. Another day starting. The silence was deafening. 7:30 a.m., sleep. A few stolen hours before the world demanded him again. The cycle repeating, day in, day out. He tossed and turned, haunted by the image of his son, Jake, 11, his voice echoing in his head. "Dad, do you even like your job?" He couldn't shake it. The question had burrowed its way into his soul. That question was the breaking point. That was the moment of decision. He could keep going, trapped in the routine, or he could fight back. It wasn't about quitting. He couldn't afford to. It was about finding a piece of himself again. Remembering who he was before the weight of responsibility crushed him. The motorcycle was his escape, a forgotten dream, a symbol of his potential. He hadn't touched it since the divorce. Sarah hated the smell of oil and gasoline. She wanted a clean house, a clean life. That's why they are not together. He was afraid, unsure. It was a rusty hunk of metal. He hadn't touched it in years, a symbol of failure. But it was also a chance to rebuild something. A chance to rebuild himself. 7:00 a.m. The carport was cold, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth. The light was soft, gray, the promise of a new day. He took a deep breath, the air filling his lungs. He turned the wrench, the bolt rusty, resistant. He put his weight into it, a grunt escaping his lips. It finally gave way, a small victory, a spark of hope in the darkness. The wrench slipped. Wayne cursed under his breath. His knuckles were raw, the skin cracked and stained with oil. He was 36, a third-shift warehouse supervisor, and he was spending his precious sleep hours wrestling with a stubborn bolt. The logical thing would be to go inside, crawl back into bed, and face the exhaustion later. But logic hadn't gotten him anywhere. Logic had led him to this. A small duplex, $42,000 in debt, and a strained relationship with his kids, Jake and Maya. He remembered the fishing trip like it was yesterday. The quiet lake, the rising sun, the hopeful cast of the line. And then Jake's question, so innocent, so devastating. "Dad, do you even like your job?" The question hung in the air. Wayne had mumbled something about providing for them, about needing the money. But he saw the doubt in Jake's eyes, the same doubt that gnawed at him every single day. His dad, a mechanic, had warned him about this, about letting life trap you. "Don't end up like me, Wayne," he'd said, his voice raspy from years of breathing in exhaust fumes. "Do something you love even if it don't pay much." Wayne hadn't listened. He needed the money. A baby was on the way. The warehouse job was a sure thing, $26 an hour, benefits, a temporary solution that became a life sentence. He tightened his grip on the wrench, the metal biting into his calloused hands. He thought about his ex-wife, Sarah. The divorce had been ugly. She said he was never present, always tired, always working. She wasn't wrong. He was working, yes, but was he living? Was this really life? A cycle of nights, sleep, and regrets. The bolt finally broke free with a snap, sending a jolt up his arm. Wayne stared at the rusty piece of metal in his hand. It was small, insignificant, but it was a start, a small victory in a larger battle. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of grease on his forehead. He glanced at his watch. 7:15 a.m., only 45 minutes left. He thought about Jake and Maya, his son and daughter. He wanted them to see him differently. Not as a tired shadow, but as a man with a purpose. Not as a provider, but as a father who chased his dreams. He closed his eyes, imagining the roar of the rebuilt engine, the wind in his hair, the feeling of freedom. He attacked the engine again, his movements quicker now, more confident. Each turn of the wrench, each replaced part, was a step away from the warehouse, a step closer to Wayne's garage, the business plan that had been gathering dust in his drawer for years. He would show Jake. He would show Maya. He would show himself that he was more than just a third-shift supervisor. He pictured Jake's face, his eyes lighting up as he explained the workings of the engine. He heard Maya's laughter as she sat on the back of the motorcycle, pretending to ride. Those images fueled him. They were his motivation, not the fear of failure, but the hope of a better future, for himself and for his kids. He was a mechanic like his father, and he was a man. He wiped the grease again, this time smearing it further across his face. He didn't care. The engine, the metal, the dirt, it was real. Unlike the fluorescent glow of the warehouse, the endless rows of boxes, the hollow greetings of his coworkers. "Another night, Wayne," they'd say, their voices echoing the emptiness he felt. Another night closer to what? Retirement, a life of barely scraping by. He remembered Jake's question, clear as a bell. "Dad, do you even like your job?" It wasn't said with malice, just a kid asking a question. But it had hit him like a punch to the gut. Was that what his kids saw? A man going through the motions, a machine grinding out a paycheck. He thought of his own father covered in grease whistling while he worked in his garage. That's the man he wanted to be. The man he asterisked was before life got in the way. Wayne tightened another bolt, the metal cold beneath his calloused fingers. $42,000 in debt. $18,000 on credit cards, a souvenir from the divorce. $15,000 for the F-150. Child support. It was a mountain of bills, but it didn't feel as heavy as the weight of his own disappointment. "I am done living like this," he muttered, the words lost in the morning air. He thought about Sarah, his ex-wife. The fights, the resentment, the slow, agonizing decay of their marriage. He blamed the job, the fatigue, the endless nights. But maybe, just maybe, he had given up on himself first. Maybe the job was just an excuse. He pictured her face etched with the same tired lines he saw in the mirror every morning. He didn't want that for himself. He didn't want that for his kids. He reached for another wrench, his hand shaking slightly. He had a plan scribbled on a piece of paper years ago, tucked away in a drawer, Wayne's garage, a place where he could fix things, build things, create things, a place where he could be his own boss, set his own hours, be present for his kids. It was a long shot, a pipe dream. But it was a start, and today it was a promise. He glanced at his watch again. 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes left. He worked faster, his movements fueled by a surge of adrenaline. He imagined the grand opening, the smell of oil and gasoline, the sound of engines roaring back to life. He saw Jake and Maya standing beside him, their eyes shining with pride. "This is my dad's shop," he imagined them saying. He built it himself. He wiped his hands on a rag, his heart pounding in his chest. For the first time in years, Wayne felt a flicker of hope. It was a small spark, but it was enough. The rising sun painted the garage door a pale orange. 7:46 a.m. He had to get inside and shower, but the dream lingered. Wayne knew he couldn't keep going like this. The warehouse, the endless nights, the empty duplex. It wasn't living, it was existing. Jake's question echoed in his mind. "Dad, do you even like your job?" It was like a punch to the gut, a cold splash of reality. Wayne realized he'd been lying to himself for years, telling himself it was all for them, all for the kids. But what kind of example was he setting? A man trapped, a man defeated. He tightened a bolt on the carburetor, the metal cold against his calloused fingers. His dad would have known exactly what to do. He remembered spending hours in his father's garage as a kid, handing him tools, watching him work. The old man had a way of making even the most stubborn engine purr like a kitten. Wayne had wanted that too. But life had gotten in the way, a baby on the way, and then the warehouse job, promising himself it was just temporary. The truth was that temporary job had become a life sentence. 8 years as a third-shift warehouse supervisor had worn him down, chipped away at his soul. He thought of the money he owed, $42,000, $18,000 in credit card debt, the truck loan, child support. It felt like an anchor dragging him down, deeper and deeper. But what really scared him was the thought of waking up one day, old and broken, with nothing to show for it but a pile of bills. He reached for the piece of paper with the business plan he wrote for Wayne's garage. It was dog-eared and stained with oil, a relic from a younger, more optimistic version of himself. He remembered the excitement he felt when he first wrote it, the visions of creating something of his own, something he could be proud of. He laughed quietly, a dry, humorless sound. What a joke! A 36-year-old warehouse worker with a pipe dream. But then he looked at his hands, the scarred knuckles, the ingrained grease. These hands knew how to fix things. These hands had rebuilt engines, wired houses, and built furniture. These hands were capable. He recalled the time he taught Jake how to change a tire, the boy's eyes wide with admiration. That's what he wanted. Not just a paycheck, but respect. He wanted his kids to see him as more than just a tired, grumpy dad. The revelation hit him hard. He didn't need to quit his job, not yet. He didn't need to win the lottery or find a sugar mama. All he needed was 1 hour. 1 hour each morning to reclaim his life, to work on his dream. It wasn't about escaping his responsibilities. It was about finding a way to live within them. He decided to call it his quiet walk. Even though he was in the garage, he knew it wouldn't be easy. He'd still be exhausted, still be stressed. But he'd also be working towards something, building something that was his. He grabbed his phone and set a new alarm for 6:45 a.m., the new daily habit. Not for work, but for himself. The garage door trembled and rattled slightly in the early morning breeze as he grabbed a handful of new tools. He felt a glimmer of freedom. He still had 30 minutes before he had to get ready for bed, but for the first time in a long time, he had some hope. Wayne stared at the alarm he set, the numbers glowing green in the dim light of his duplex. 6:45 a.m. It felt like a betrayal of sleep, a slap in the face after the graveyard shift. But this wasn't just another alarm, this was a promise to himself and maybe to Jake and Maya. He pictured their faces, Jake's wary respect, Maya's unconditional love, both fading under the shadow of his exhaustion. He needed to show them a different version of their dad. He knew Sarah wouldn't understand. She'd probably call it another one of his projects he'd abandon in a week. But this wasn't a passing hobby. This was about survival, about clawing back a piece of himself before it was too late. The $18,000 in credit card debt from the divorce loomed large, a constant reminder of his failures. The $15,000 he still owed on his 2017 F-150, the truck he used to be proud of but now felt like just another ball and chain. He wouldn't let those numbers define him anymore. He walked into the cramped living room, the cheap furniture casting long shadows. He grabbed the small, worn photo album from the bookshelf. His dad's garage, Wayne's garage, a place of grease, laughter, and the satisfaction of fixing what was broken. A wave of guilt washed over him. He remembered the dream shelved for a temporary warehouse job at 24 to provide for a family. The temporary had lasted 12 years. Now here he was at 36 with a broken family and a broken dream. He opened the album to a photo of Jake, about 6 years old, covered in grease, grinning as he handed Wayne a wrench. "Like Grandpa," Jake had shouted. That was the feeling he craved. The feeling of passing something on, of being a role model, not just a provider. The image burned in his mind. The photo was old and slightly faded, but it came at the right moment. He felt the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. What if he failed? What if he poured his heart and soul into this and it amounted to nothing? The fear was real, but beneath the fear a spark of hope flickered. A memory of the roar of a perfectly tuned engine, the satisfaction of solving a complex problem, the pride in his dad's eyes when he finally rebuilt that old '67 Mustang. "You got the touch, son," his dad had said. He didn't want that touch to fade away, lost in the sterile confines of the warehouse. He whispered to himself, 1 hour, that's all it takes. 1 hour and one step. The 5:00 a.m. alarm blared, ripping Wayne from a restless sleep. He slammed the snooze, the sound echoing in the small duplex. 5 more minutes wouldn't matter. He knew that was a lie. Every minute mattered. He wrestled the covers off, the chill of the room biting at his skin. He shuffled to the bathroom, the linoleum cold beneath his bare feet. The mirror reflected a stranger. Pale, haggard, the gray in his sandy brown hair stark against the fluorescent light. He splashed cold water on his face, trying to shock himself awake. The image of Jake's grease-stained grin flashed in his mind. Like Grandpa. Wayne wouldn't let that boy down. He wouldn't let his dad down either. He pulled on his worn jeans, a faded t-shirt, and his red wing-work boots. They were old, comfortable, molded to his feet. A familiar comfort. He laced them tight, a ritual as old as the warehouse job itself. He grabbed his coffee thermos, the dent on the side a reminder of a clumsy drop years ago. Small imperfections that told a story. The carport was colder than the house, the pre-dawn air thick with moisture. The old '72 Triumph Bonneville sat under a tarp, a silent promise. He yanked the tarp off, the smell of oil and rust filling his nostrils. A pang of guilt. He hadn't touched it in months, maybe years. The metal was cold to the touch, unforgiving. He fumbled with the rusted bolts, his calloused hands clumsy and stiff. The wrench slipped, barking his knuckles against the engine block. A curse escaped his lips. The doubt crept in again. This was harder than he remembered. His body ached from years of the warehouse shift, his mind sluggish from sleep deprivation. He wanted to quit. To go back inside, crawl into bed, and forget this foolish dream. He paused, leaned against the bike, and closed his eyes. He saw his dad, his hands just as calloused, just as scarred, patiently guiding him through a carburetor rebuild. "Patience, Wayne," his dad had said. "Every engine has its secrets. You just gotta listen." The memory gave him strength. Wayne's hands tightened on the wrench. He took a breath, exhaled, and went back to work, one bolt at a time. The first week was hell. Every morning was a battle against his own exhaustion and frustration. His back protested. His fingers bled. Progress was slow, agonizingly slow. He felt like he was going backward. Sarah, his ex-wife, called one evening. "Jake said you're working on a motorcycle again. Don't get your hopes up, Wayne. Remember what happened last time." Her words were like a slap, a reminder of past failures. He bit back a reply, told her he had to go, and hung up. The doubt swelled. He almost quit on Thursday. The fuel line refused to budge, no matter how much he wrestled with it. He threw the wrench across the carport, the sound echoing in the quiet morning. He sat on an upturned bucket, head in his hands, ready to admit defeat. A single tear rolled down his cheek. He missed his dad. He missed the easy camaraderie of the garage. He missed feeling competent, useful. Then he remembered Jake's face, the pride in his eyes when he handed Wayne that wrench all those years ago. That's what kept him going when times got tough. So he got off the bucket, picked up the wrench, and went back to the fuel line. He worked slowly, methodically, applying heat, WD-40, and a healthy dose of patience. Finally, with a stubborn groan, the fuel line relented. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. By the end of the week, Wayne hadn't made much progress. The engine was still disassembled. The frame was still covered in rust. But something had shifted inside him. The despair hadn't completely vanished, but it had been joined by something else. A quiet determination. He wasn't just fixing a motorcycle, he was fixing himself. He was reclaiming his life 1 hour, 1 bolt, 1 greasy hand at a time. And he was honoring the memory of his dad. The following week started the same. Wayne's alarm blared at 8:00 p.m., jolting him from a restless sleep. The black coffee tasted bitter, a familiar companion. He drove to the warehouse, the world outside still shrouded in darkness. But this time there was a subtle difference. A sliver of anticipation, a faint thrum of excitement under the layers of fatigue. He knew that in just a few hours he'd be back in the carport, wrench in hand. Day 12 was hard. Another shift filled with the same monotonous tasks, the endless parade of boxes, the fluorescent lights that never seemed to dim. But Wayne found himself noticing things he hadn't before. The way the forklift driver, Maria, always had a kind word for everyone. The intricate network of conveyor belts that kept the operation running smoothly. A grudging respect for the well-oiled machine he was a part of. He made a point to thank Maria for her help, and she smiled, surprised. "Thanks, Wayne." "You too." Day 16. The rusted exhaust pipe mocked him. He tried every trick he knew, but it wouldn't budge. Sweat dripped down his face, mingling with the grime on his hands. He was about to give up when his son, Jake, walked into the carport. "Hey, Dad," Jake said, hesitant. "What you doing?" Wayne wiped his brow with the back of his hand. "Trying to get this damn exhaust pipe off. It stuck tighter than a tick." Jake watched him for a moment, then pointed to a can of penetrating oil. "Did you try that stuff over there?" Wayne had overlooked it in his frustration. He grabbed the can, sprayed the joint liberally, and waited. A few minutes later, with a satisfying crack, the exhaust pipe came loose. Jake grinned. "See, sometimes you just gotta be patient." Day 21, 3 weeks of waking up before the world, of facing the cold steel and stubborn metal. 3 weeks of fighting his own exhaustion and self-doubt. Wayne stood back and looked at the engine. Cleaned, polished, reassembled. It wasn't perfect, but it was his. He reached for the starter button, hesitated, then pressed it. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. The sound filled the carport, a symphony of pistons and gasoline. A wave of pure, unadulterated joy washed over him. He cut the engine and turned to see Jake standing in the doorway. "Sounds good, Dad." Jake said, his eyes shining. "Real good." Wayne smiled, a genuine smile that reached all the way to his tired eyes. "Yeah," he said, "it does." That morning, Jake stayed, and he helped, handing him tools, offering advice, just like he used to when he was a boy, father and son working side by side. The next morning, as Wayne, 36-year-old third-shift warehouse supervisor, pulled into the driveway of his small duplex rental, something felt different. The sky wasn't just gray, it was holding the promise of dawn. He still felt the bone-deep weariness that had been his constant companion for years, but it was different. There was a lightness to it, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since his dad's old garage. He remembered his dad, grease smeared across his forehead, explaining the intricate workings of a carburetor. He smiled, a genuine smile this time. Inside, he resisted the urge to collapse onto the couch. Instead, he showered quickly, the hot water a welcome assault on his aching muscles. He grabbed a quick cup of coffee and headed out to the carport. The old motorcycle sat there, a testament to his forgotten dreams. He flipped on the work light, the warm glow cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. He picked up where he left off, fiddling with the wiring harness. It was intricate, frustrating work, but he found himself lost in the details. The days bled into one another, each morning a small victory. At work, his coworkers noticed a change. He was still quiet, still the reliable Wayne they knew, but there was a new edge to him. When a forklift broke down, he didn't just call maintenance, he offered suggestions, drawing on the knowledge he'd almost forgotten he possessed. He even cracked a joke, something he hadn't done in years. He didn't tell them about the motorcycle. Not yet. His kids noticed too. Maya, his 8-year-old daughter, asked him if he was sleeping better. Jake started hanging around the carport more often, asking questions about the engine, about the tools. One Saturday, when Wayne picked them up for their weekend visit, Jake actually smiled. "Dad," he said, "can we work on the bike this weekend?" Wayne's heart swelled. "Sure, son," he said. "Sure." He felt a surge of pride, a feeling he hadn't experienced since teaching Jake to change a tire, which now seemed like a lifetime ago. That weekend was different. They didn't just watch TV or play video games. They worked together. Jake held the flashlight, his small hands surprisingly steady. Maya surprisingly helped sort bolts and screws. Wayne explained the workings of the engine, the principles of combustion, the magic of turning gasoline into power. He saw their eyes light up with understanding, with excitement. He was teaching them something real, something useful. He was being a dad again, not just a provider. The debt still loomed, the exhaustion still gnawed, but there was a new current running beneath the surface of Wayne's life. He started bringing a lunch to work instead of buying greasy fast food, saving a few dollars each day. He looked at the loan on his 2017 F-150 and started researching ways to refinance it. Small victories building on one another like the layers of paint on the motorcycle's frame. 1 month, 30 days of waking before the world, 30 days of fighting the fatigue, 30 days of reclaiming his life 1 hour at a time. The spark was there, and it was growing into a flame, the flame he thought he'd lost forever. The second month was about building, solidifying the ritual, 7 a.m. alarm, black coffee, walk to the carport. The initial surge of energy had leveled out, replaced by a steady, quiet determination. The mornings weren't always easy. Some days the fatigue was a physical weight pressing him down. But Wayne, 36, dragged himself out anyway. He knew what waited for him in the carport wasn't just a motorcycle, it was a piece of himself he thought he'd lost. His hands, calloused and scarred from years of warehouse work, moved with newfound purpose. He wasn't just tightening bolts, he was piecing together a dream. He sketched out revised plans for Wayne's garage on a greasy notepad, incorporating Jake's and Maya's suggestions from the weekend. He even started watching YouTube tutorials on small business accounting, forcing himself to learn the language of spreadsheets and profit margins. It wasn't easy, but neither was his job as a third-shift warehouse supervisor. One morning, Sarah, his ex-wife, called. "Jake said you're teaching him about engines," she said, her voice hesitant. "He's really into it. Just be careful, okay? Don't want him getting hurt." Wayne understood the unspoken concern. He'd always been a careful father, but maybe not a present one. "I am, Sarah," he said. "He's helping me. It's good." There was a pause, a silent acknowledgement of the change in him. "Good, Wayne," she said softly and hung up. He started using his lunch breaks at the warehouse to research parts online, comparing prices and looking for deals. His mechanical mind, honed by years of fixing broken equipment, quickly grasped the nuances of the market. He found a local junkyard that specialized in vintage bikes and started making regular trips after his shift, haggling for parts and learning the stories behind the machines. He even bartered some of his welding skills for a rare carburetor he needed. The bike was coming together. The frame, once rusted and forgotten, gleamed with a fresh coat of deep blue paint. The engine, painstakingly rebuilt, hummed with a throaty growl. Wayne realized he wasn't just fixing a motorcycle, he was rebuilding himself. His sleep remained limited, but he felt less exhausted overall. The tension in his shoulders began to ease, replaced by a quiet sense of accomplishment. That second weekend, Jake brought a friend over to see the bike. Wayne watched as they peppered him with questions, their eyes wide with admiration. He explained the intricacies of the engine, the history of the model, the satisfaction of bringing something old back to life. He saw Jake puff out his chest a little, a subtle display of pride. Later, as he tucked Jake and Maya into bed, Jake looked up at him and said, "Dad, can we really open a garage someday?" Wayne smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "Yeah, son," he said, "we can." That night, Wayne slept deeper than he had in years. The weight of the future still pressed down on him, but now there was also the lightness of hope. Day 60. The momentum was building, a slow, steady climb. Wayne still woke up at 8 p.m., still drank the same black coffee, still drove his 2017 Ford F-150 to the warehouse. But something had shifted. The heavy weariness hadn't completely vanished, but it was lighter, easier to carry. He found himself humming along to the radio on the drive, a habit he'd abandoned years ago. At work, the change was subtle but noticeable. His crew responded to his directions with more enthusiasm, less of the grudging obedience he was used to. He even cracked a few jokes, something unheard of for the usually taciturn Wayne. His supervisor, noticing the improved morale, offered him a lead role on a new inventory project. a chance to showcase his sharp mechanical mind and problem-solving skills. It wouldn't be much of a raise, but it was recognition, a sign that someone saw his value beyond just a warm body filling a slot. The real shift happened with his kids. Maya, his 8-year-old, started asking him about the bike, peppering him with questions about spark plugs and carburetors. He patiently explained, using simple terms she could understand, watching her face light up with each new piece of knowledge. One afternoon, he found her in the carport, carefully wiping down the newly painted gas tank with a soft cloth. "It's so cool, Dad," she said, her eyes shining. "Can I help you put the stickers on?" Wayne felt a lump form in his throat. Jake, the 11-year-old, had become a regular fixture in the carport, handing Wayne tools, asking about the business plan he was refining in his spare moments. Wayne showed him the sketches he'd made for the shop layout, explaining how he envisioned the space. Jake even offered suggestions, drawing on his newfound interest in computers to propose a digital inventory system. "We could track parts and orders online, Dad," he said, his voice full of enthusiasm. "It'd be way more efficient." The fishing trip 2 months before felt like a lifetime ago. Now, instead of a silent, withdrawn father, Jake saw a man with a purpose, a project, a dream. The quiet question that had shattered Wayne's self-deception had become a source of connection, a shared vision. One evening, after a particularly productive session in the carport, Jake looked at him and said, "Dad, I'm proud of you." Wayne simply nodded, unable to speak past the emotion that choked him. Sarah, his ex-wife, even seemed to notice a change. She was still reserved, but there was a flicker of warmth in her eyes when he picked up the kids. She commented on how happy the kids seemed, how engaged Wayne was with them. He didn't delve into the reasons why, but he felt a quiet sense of vindication. He wasn't just a paycheck anymore. He was a father, a role model, a man building something of his own. The debt still loomed, the $18,000 in credit card debt, the $15,000 on the truck. The $4,850 a month didn't stretch much further, but it was enough. The anxiety hadn't disappeared, but it was tempered by hope. He wasn't just surviving, he was building. He was carving out a future, one 30-minute walk, one rusty bolt, one shared moment at a time. And for the first time in a long time, Wayne felt like he was finally on the right path, not just going through the motions. Day 87, 3 months. Wayne woke up to the 5 a.m. alarm, but the usual dread was muted. Today felt different. He glanced at the bank statement on his phone before getting out of bed, $2,300, all thanks to the online parts sales Jake had set up, the money sitting there. For the first time since the divorce, he could see daylight through the financial fog. He padded to the kitchen, brewed his coffee, and headed out to the carport. The rising sun cast long shadows as he tinkered with the BSA, the engine gleaming under the early light. Jake would be over later to help him install the new fuel lines. The 11-year-old had a knack for the details, something Wayne admired, a gift he hoped his boy would use. He thought back to his own dad, his hands stained with grease in the garage, the smell of oil and gasoline a comforting perfume. He'd let him turn the wrench, feel the metal, learn the language of engines. He wanted that same connection with Jake, and it was happening right here in this cramped carport. That afternoon, Wayne got the call from corporate. A regional manager wanted to see him, which was unusual, maybe even not good. He drove into the office at noon. The manager, a brisk woman in a tailored suit, offered him a seat and got right to the point. "Wayne, we've been tracking the numbers since you implemented the new inventory system. Efficiency is up 15%. Waste is down. It's made a real difference." She paused, then leaned forward. "We want to offer you a promotion. Day shift. New role, process optimization manager. It comes with a raise." Wayne felt his gut tighten. A new job, a chance to get off third shift, it was all he wanted. A raise, he asked quietly. How much of a raise? $12,000 a year plus benefits. A year ago, he would have jumped at the offer. Now he hesitated. He thought of the carport, the bike, Jake's enthusiasm, the business plan he was steadily refining. He saw his son looking at him with pride. He thought about saying no. He paused, took a deep breath. "I'll take it," he said quietly. "I'll take it." That evening, he told Jake and Maya. Jake pumped his fist. Maya gave him a rare, genuine smile. "That's great, Dad." Even Sarah offered a curt congratulations. Later, as he sat in the carport staring at the BSA, Wayne felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. He'd achieved his surface goal, a better job, more money, but it felt hollow. He picked up the business plan he hadn't touched for months. He opened it, the pages dog-eared and stained with grease. He started to sketch out a layout for his shop, Wayne's garage, just like his dad's. The fatigue didn't disappear, but underneath it, a new energy thrummed. The promotion wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. He had more to do. He had a promise to keep to himself, to